Hey guys, this is Sylvia again. I am going to do the final part of this book. I hope you guys have enjoyed it thus far. It revealed a lot of stuff, man. It's just interesting. And you got to remember, there's always two sides to a story. So we didn't get a chance to hear his side, but so far from what she said, some stuff that she mentioned is what Robert has been accused of. But the sad thing is, no one ever have brought any charges against this man. But Robert was charged, convicted, and it's crazy. But I'm going to go ahead and give you the last bit of it. Let me go ahead and take this here. All right, this is chapter 13 of Down the Rabbit Hole by Holly Madison. Her account of being a playboy mansion girlfriend of Hugh Hefner. Thank you for my hearts, sweethearts. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. But let's go ahead and listen to it, okay?
Chapter 14. "What do you know about this business?" the king said to Alice. "Nothing," said Alice. "Nothing whatever," persisted the king. "Nothing whatever," said Alice. Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It turned out that Peep Show wasn't just any small potatoes Vegas review. This was serious business, and the creator and mastermind behind the production was none other than Tony Award-winning choreographer Jerry Mitchell. I knew that this could be just the opportunity I'd been hoping for. I officially threw my hat in the ring the next day. Auditions and interviews for the show were extensive and brought me back to Las Vegas regularly over the next few weeks. "Do you guys mind waiting in the other room?" I asked my manager and my friends Angel and Allison. I was preparing for my final Peep Show audition in front of the show's director. "Oh yeah, no problem," Allison said, motioning everybody into the next room. The role required me to wear the skimpiest of costumes, which I wore as part of the audition process, and I was still a little self-conscious, despite my new Dancing with the Stars physique, and wanted some privacy. Contrary to popular belief, just because I had posed nude for a magazine doesn't mean I am the most confident, exhibitionistic person in the world. In fact, I was nervous that I wouldn't look good enough to be cast. What if I had cellulite? What if my body looked too fake? 7 years of being reminded that I never looked quite good enough was a hard burden to shake. Plus, I felt sort of dumb performing the choreography while weaving around all the furniture in the cramped hotel suite. I know it seems counterintuitive that I was nervous for the audition, since I was so eager to perform nightly for a large live audience, but there was something comforting about knowing that I'd be on a large stage, far removed from the crowd, with the appropriate distance between us, and of course, flattering lighting. "What if I have tattoos?" I asked Jerry nervously. "And bruises. I bruise really easily. Should I be wearing body makeup?" "Not unless you want to," he shrugged with his signature warm smile. "Tattoos and things don't really matter to me. It's more important that everyone in the cast is different, unique, and comfortable in their own skin." While that should have sounded reassuring, I was far from comfortable in my own skin. I'd spent most of my adult life at the mansion being required to clone the other women around me, so the idea of being unique was alien. I had a hard time believing that unique was really something anyone would want to see. I couldn't even wrap my head around what was unique about me. More and more, I worried I wasn't right for the part. After performing the choreography I had learned, my audition was done. Though the producers would assure my manager that I had done great in the audition, I had no idea if they really thought that or if they were just giving him a polite answer. I wasn't particularly confident about my chances. As the month went by, more names were being floated into consideration, and it was rumored that Lindsay Lohan was the frontrunner. "I'm screwed," I thought, my confidence quickly deflating. "They'll definitely pick her. Imagine the publicity they could get." One of my Peep Show callbacks happened to land on Hef's birthday weekend, which he traditionally celebrated at the Palms in Las Vegas. Mary let me know that Bridget, Kendra, and I had been invited to attend. Naturally, part of me wanted to stay as far away from the man and his party as possible. But at the same time, you have to understand that I'd only been out of the mansion for about 6 months at this point, and while I was increasingly coming to terms with the hell Hef had put me through, there was still a part of me that wanted to be able to walk away on good terms with a clean slate like all his other ex-girlfriends. I didn't want anything from Hef, except perhaps for him to stop bad-mouthing me. Plus, I wanted to see Bridget and Kendra. Bridget was planning on singing Happy Birthday at Moon Nightclub for the second half of the festivities that night, and I wanted to support her. Be that as it may, I only agreed to attend the soiree if I could have my own booth. It was proposed that I join Hef in his booth, but I needed to stand my ground as an individual. I was sick of the attempts to recruit me back into the harem. I had heard through the grapevine that Crystal Harris had become Hef's new main girlfriend. I was thrilled that he had fallen in love again. I hoped her presence on his arm and the fact that they had just started filming Girls Next Door Season 6 would take some of the pressure off of me. The friends of Hef's that had previously been so supportive of me had recently become less kind, believing I had somehow left him in the lurch. Now maybe things would be different. For my part, I was only interested in moving forward with positivity, despite anything that had happened in the past. The wind was whipping wildly across the Palms Place pool. Since it was considered a pool party, I chose to wear a black skull print bikini and denim skirt, but I may have been better served with a windbreaker. It was awesome seeing the other girls again. Kendra complimented me on my new abs, and it was great to meet Hank and to see Bridget's new beau, Nick Carpenter. When Hef finally arrived at the party, new girlfriends in tow, Bridget, Kendra, and I went to say hello and wish him a happy birthday. I greeted Carissa and Christina, who were warm and friendly, and then said hello to Hef, who looked more pale than usual, but otherwise seemed to be in a relatively good mood. Next, I introduced myself to his new main girlfriend, who was occupying the seat to his left. Hi, I'm Holly, I said with a big smile sticking out my hand. Remembering how people used to treat me, I made a conscious effort to go out of my way to be kind. Hi, she said in a forced sing-song voice, offering me a limp, weak handshake. Was that a sneer on her face, or is the midday sun causing her to squint? I wondered. Immediately, my gut told me that something was up with this girl, but I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. She was young and new to all the commotion surrounding Hef. I chose to dismiss her shitty first impression as poor social skills and not the snobbishness that it felt like. Hef's photographer Elaine lined us all up for a photo. As the former girlfriends, Bridget, Kendra, and I lined up next to the new girls, but were directed by Hef and the photographers to stand next to Hef instead. I felt bad that the new girlfriends were being shoved aside for the famous ex-girlfriends. I'd been shoved aside so many times myself in these situations and remembered how awful it felt. After the photos were snapped, Hef and the Shannon twins said goodbye as they were whisked away for press interviews. Crystal couldn't even be bothered to look in our direction. You got it, my manager gleefully shouted. What? I squealed into my cell phone, hardly able to believe what I was hearing. Just a few days before my return for the Dancing with the Stars season finale, I received word that I had landed the part of Bo Peep for a 3-month stint in Las Vegas. I was absolutely over the moon and determined to work hard, promote my butt off, and with luck, find a way to become a more permanent part of the production. The turnaround for production was quick and required me to get out to Las Vegas immediately following the Dancing with the Stars finale. As I busied myself with packing the few things I had in my Santa Monica condo, I got a call from the Shannon twins. They wanted to see if I would meet them for lunch in Beverly Hills. Sure, the twins had a crazy reputation, but I liked them. They had always been nice to me, and I assumed they wanted some advice on navigating the mansion and Hef. Like I said earlier, you don't get a mansion operations manual when you move in, so I was happy to help them any way I could. We want you to come back, Christina blurted out not 5 minutes after we sat down at Il Pastillo. Yeah, come back, Carissa whined, their words almost overlapping. These two literally finished each other's sentences. I can't come back. I've already made a decision to move on, I said sympathetically, picking up a piece of bread out of the basket. Why, what's wrong? I knew something must be askew for the twins to be asking my help. The twins went on to say that they thought Crystal was mean, scowls appearing on their faces. Apparently, Hef's newest girlfriend wasn't too good at making friends. They even went on to say she was mean to Hef, though they didn't give specific examples. Really? I asked. In the past, I've witnessed some of Hef's more vocal girlfriends fight back or disobey, but never were they outwardly mean to him, not to his face anyway. I wasn't sure what the twins meant when they said she was mean. It was just clear that they didn't like living with her. One of the twins chimed in that Hef was really sick and not doing well before the other one took over, saying that he had fallen down in his bathroom the other day and wet himself. Christina reiterated that Crystal wasn't good for him, as if to imply his declining health was somehow Crystal's doing. Oh, that's awful, I said solemnly, bouncing my head back and forth from Tweedledee to Tweedledum, trying to keep up with the story. Friends inside the mansion had confided to me that Hef had become extremely frail and downtrodden. When the economy had crashed and burned in late 2008, I knew that Playboy must have taken a pretty severe hit. Hef already had financial pressures gnawing at him prior to Wall Street crashing, so this couldn't have helped matters. Christina tried to explain things to me, saying that Crystal felt really threatened by me and that any time she heard I had spoken to Mary, she freaked out because she thought I was going to come back. Carissa cut in and said that when Hef had heard I was going to be at his birthday party, he took extra time in front of the mirror getting ready and that it had made Crystal jealous. Well, she doesn't have to worry, I said calmly and coolly. I'm definitely not coming back. In fact, I'm really trying my best to give Hef space, and one of the blonde beauties cut me off, telling me that Crystal took the panel off my old desk with the birds and the initials. Well, that was fast, I thought. Years ago, when I had convinced Hef to let me have a desk installed in the vanity, I had a professional woodworker from the mansion staff fashion a beautiful hand-carved panel for the desk drawer etched with the likenesses of my favorite mansion birds. In the center of the panel was a heart with my initials, HM. Considering Hef's monogram, HMH, littered everything at the mansion, notepads, matchbooks, you name it, I figured he could always add an H at the end to make it his own initials on the off chance I didn't last. I have to admit, I felt a little slighted. Pictures of Tina, Brandy, and Kimberly littered Hef's room for years after I had moved in, and Crystal was already throwing fits about any sign of me just a few months into dating Hef. It's a little early in the relationship for her to be that picky, I said with a small smile. I didn't want to give the twins any false hope that I was going to come back, and I wasn't there to badmouth Crystal, so I stopped talking and wrapped up the conversation. After lunch, I hugged the twins goodbye, wished them luck, and let them know they could call me any time. I didn't know what to make of what Carissa and Christina had told me. I didn't feel like they were trying to sensationalize things. They just had their own way of communicating that didn't always make sense to me and no filter when it came to revealing others' personal details. While living at the mansion, the girls even told the son that Hef was losing his hearing due to his use of Viagra. I have to say, I was a little curious about this Crystal character. Though I kept far away from Hef and Crystal, in part to avoid replicating how Tina had made me feel after her departure, it still seemed like Crystal had major jealousy issues. A few weeks earlier, I had run into a Los Angeles magazine editor I knew socially who told me a story about Hef begging him to retract a statement he had made about my being welcome back in his life any time. The editor threw up his hands and said he told Hef he couldn't retract it, that he had him on tape saying it, and that he heard his new girlfriend threw a fit about it when it came out. When it came to being dramatic, it appeared Hef had met his match. As part of my contract with Peep Show, I was given a high roller suite at Planet Hollywood. Not only did I have a steady job, I also had a reason to return to Las Vegas, a place that felt more like home in a few short months than LA had felt in almost 10 years. With my Prius brimming with most of my belongings, I said my tearful goodbyes to Mary and Captain Bob and headed straight for the desert. Not long after arriving in town, I was finally able to meet up with Chris's bodyguard at the Luxor in order to grab my valuables that had been sitting in his penthouse safe for the last 2.5 months. Chris had told me that mailing them wasn't the best idea. I can't wait to finally get my stuff back, I sighed to Angel, who had become my new best friend, as we drove down Las Vegas Boulevard. It's like severing the last tie of that relationship. It feels good to finally move on. Amen, exclaimed Angel as we drove into the Luxor's North Valet. The bodyguard, whose expensive SUV had been idling as if he was on his way somewhere, jumped out of his car after spotting me. You drive a Prius? He sneered. Yeah, I replied, caught off guard by his making fun of me. He'd always been nice to me before, but was all of a sudden condescending and rude. He let out a snarky laugh as he gave my car the once-over. Thanks for bringing this stuff down, I said, eager to get out of what was starting to feel like a really awkward situation. Yeah, no problem, he said shortly, handing me a bulging manila envelope. Without as much as a goodbye, he got back to his truck and took off. I jumped back into my car and ripped open the envelope, anxious to see my things. What's wrong? Angel asked, seeing the upset look on my face. Some of my jewelry was missing, specifically the items he had given me, the diamond-encrusted infinity necklace and the large cross. Did he seriously take back those gifts, I thought? It's not like I intended to wear jewelry given to me by an ex-boyfriend, but I didn't think he'd actually take them back either. It was as if he was telling me I was never worth it to begin with. It was also a petty, cheap move. After all, it wasn't like I was asking for the Dali back, although perhaps I should have. It wasn't about the jewelry, although I did wear the small necklace and ring he had given me to a few press events, knowing I'd be photographed and what a big fuck you that would come across as. It was about him not having the decency to say something to me about it. Once again, I felt like I had been thrown out with the trash. I decided to send him a text and give him the benefit of the doubt. Hey, the jewelry you gave me was missing from the packet I just picked up, I typed into my BlackBerry. I thought maybe he would have a few words explaining why he wanted to keep those things, and that would have made it all okay. But I never got a response. I looked at my new life in Las Vegas as an opportunity to reinvent myself. It had been an uphill battle, but I was finally where I wanted to be as a single, successful career woman making something of my life. To celebrate, I traded in my leased Prius and bought a convertible Porsche with some of the money I had earned on Dancing with the Stars. I wasted no time having it painted a custom sparkly pink. It didn't take long before I felt completely at home in my Planet Hollywood suite. I was even given an adjacent suite for my friend, playmate Laura Croft. Laura was eager to make the move to Vegas, and I thought she would be a great character for the new reality series that I was hoping to develop. She was very pretty and had a wild personality that I hoped would translate on television. Living at Planet Hollywood was absolutely surreal. It felt like all the perks of the mansion had been rolled up into one luxurious package and dropped squarely at my feet. Besides the gorgeous suite and 24-hour butler service, my Peep Show contract covered all the room service and restaurant food I could eat, including the casino Starbucks and limitless salon and spa services. The best part was I never felt lonely. At any given moment, there was a 24-hour party right outside my door. As the youngest headliner on the strip, I took the city by storm. I knew that promoting myself was the key to having a successful run with Peep Show, so I attended every opening, every red carpet event, every pool party, and landed myself on the cover of all the Vegas entertainment magazines before my debut. Despite the crumbling economy, it was a magical time in Las Vegas. Somehow it seemed that the city was extra determined to carry on just as fabulously as it had before. When I wasn't busy running around taking in all Sin City had to offer, I was buried in Peep Show rehearsals. I couldn't have been more excited at the opportunity, but I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to pull it off. Would people really pay to see me? I only had a few weeks of rehearsal and managed to pick up the choreography pretty quickly, thanks in large part to my time on Dancing with the Stars, but all those insecurities were still running rampant. Sure, I had done pictorials for Playboy, but those photos were rigidly posed, heavily lit, and accessorized to perfectly complement my body. For Peep Show, I would be performing on stage for 90 minutes in front of a live audience wearing the tiniest costumes. My body had taken such a beating during the exhaustive rehearsals, and I had bruises everywhere, not to mention scars and what remained of my Playboy bunny tattoo. My boobs are going to look disgusting, I told Nick, the choreographer. I imagined them bouncing all over the place during the highly aerobic performance, and it didn't necessarily strike me as sexy. He assured me that it was all in my head. This was my big break. If I could manage to fill seats and earn favorable reviews over those 3 months, maybe they would decide to let me stay. I busted my ass day and night to make sure I gave this show everything. The tremendously talented cast was warm and welcoming. I'm not sure they thought a reality TV star could add anything to their show, but they saw how hard I was working and that I took the production very seriously. It wasn't long before I joined their inner circle. Most of the cast were Broadway singers and dancers brought in from New York. Jerry wanted the best of everything. So all these new transplants bonded quickly. And like me, they were taking the city by storm. After rehearsals, the cast would hang out at Strip House, the restaurant next to our theater, and hit up clubs every couple of nights. I grew especially close to the lead singer, Josh Strickland, who became like a brother to me almost instantly. I don't think there was ever a group of people that had as much fun as we did. It was an amazing time to be a part of that show. As I prepped for my debut, I'd watch Kelly Monaco's nightly performances. She'd offer me a friendly wave from the rafters before taking her plunge down onto the stage each night. For so long, I dreamed of becoming a performer, and this was my chance to prove to everyone that I was capable of more than being a trophy girlfriend. It didn't faze me that the audience was never packed. Maybe it should have. The show was averaging roughly 300 people a night, which was pretty dismal considering the size of the theater and the expense of the production. But in early 2009, people weren't flocking to Vegas to see shows. If they happened to come to the city, they most likely spent their time in the casinos hoping to earn back some of what they lost in the recession. Either way, it was clear that something needed to change to help drive attendance. So, right when I entered production, executives began an entire overhaul on Peep Show's marketing campaign. You couldn't turn a corner in Las Vegas without seeing me smiling on a billboard, poster, or taxi. Suddenly, the show had a face, and it was mine. But whether or not that face would sell tickets remained to be seen. As bad luck would have it, when my opening night came around, I hit some rough waters. Earlier that day, I had decided to text Chris. In retrospect, it was a dumb move, but I was just so happy and in a place where personally I wanted to forgive and forget. I'd heard from mutual acquaintances that Chris was not pleased when I got the Peep Show gig and announced my return to Las Vegas. After all, it had been his agenda to banish me from Vegas as if I had never existed. It must have chafed him even more that my appearance on Dancing with the Stars ended just as I had landed Peep Show. And whether I liked it or not, Chris was still a high profile person in my new hometown, which could prove to be very small at times. Why not make an attempt to bury the hatchet? We'd almost certainly run into each other at some point. Hey, I just wanted to extend an invitation to my premiere party tonight, I typed into my phone. I wish you and your girlfriend the best. I assumed I wouldn't hear back from him, but wanted to extend the olive branch, so at least I knew I did what I could to end things on the best note possible. A few hours later, I was backstage in my dressing room, putting the finishing touches on my hair and makeup. I was taking a few deep breaths to calm my nerves when I heard my cell phone buzz. It was a text message from Chris. Instinctively, I looked at the clock. He must be going on late, I thought. It was a few minutes after his second show would have started. I expected a generic good luck tonight message. Instead, it went a little something like this. I told myself I wouldn't do this, but I am answering your text anyway. Chris is with me now. Stop texting him. You are disgusting. You are in a burlesque show because you can't do anything else. You used an old man to get to the B list. Chris told me the real reason you guys broke up. It's not because of scheduling differences. It was because you were on antidepressants and he couldn't be with someone like that. If I had your reputation, I would be on antidepressants too. You are the biggest running joke around here. You got used. Lose this number. My face went white and I felt faint. I was completely beside myself. Apparently, his new girlfriend had taken his phone during his performance. I sat still for what felt like 10 minutes, reading and rereading the text. So many petty comebacks flashed through my mind. I wanted to tell her that soon she would be the biggest running joke. Chris routinely dumped his girlfriends whenever he had a famous fling, and many of them would come crawling back the moment it fizzled. I wanted to tell her that no one would even want to look at her face, let alone pay to see it. But mostly, I wanted to tell her that Chris lied to her about our breakup. I already knew he could be a piece of shit, but I couldn't believe he was sharing my private life with her. During one of our late night talks, I had confided to Chris that I had taken antidepressants in the past. I was never ashamed of needing help, but the fact that he would use that information against me really pissed me off. It wasn't right. After taking a moment, I simply replied, Chris lied to you. I wasn't even on antidepressants when we were together. I didn't need to prove anything to her, and who knows if she would even believe me anyway, but I wanted to say my piece. Not to mention, I wanted to take the opportunity to scroll through my Blackberry and find one of the many flirty texts Chris sent me 6 weeks earlier when I was on Dancing with the Stars, and after he had already moved her in. I selected a particularly salacious one, typed in my response to her rant, and hit send. Oh my God, what happened? Angel asked. She'd come backstage to wish me luck and immediately registered the tears welling up in my eyes. I read the text out loud to her and explained what happened. Do not let this get to you, she said, grabbing my shoulders and looking me in the eye. Do not let this ruin your night. And don't think for a second she doesn't know what she's doing. She knows this is your big night. It's all over town. Thanks, I said, sniffing back the tears, so grateful that Angel had been there at that exact moment to say precisely what I needed to hear. You're right. I took a deep breath, stood up from my chair, pulled my shoulders back, and left my dressing room to face the press. Being the small town that the Vegas entertainment community is, I eventually heard about the aftermath of my response to that mean text. After reading it, and Chris's earlier message, his girlfriend didn't let him escape unscathed. She apparently made an absolute scene in his dressing room during intermission and left him, only to come crawling back later, of course. I changed my number after that. Unfortunately, the night would not be without another hiccup as the show encountered some technical difficulties. The lift that was supposed to carry the male lead and me onto the stage for my big number wasn't working. As the stage went dark between scenes, the stagehands swept the props and us off into the wings. Quickly, I raced down the backstage stairs for my change, which included being dried off and having my hair redone in roughly 60 seconds, before making a far less dramatic entrance from the side of the stage. After the show, the cast laughed off the glitch and encouraged me, still rather distressed over it, to do the same. It was somehow freeing to know that I could survive even the most inopportune malfunctions and still manage to go on. Despite the mean text message and the broken lift, my official debut in Peep Show couldn't have been more perfect. After the performance, executives hosted a gala. For me. While fancy parties weren't anything new, I felt like the toast of the town, drinking champagne and hanging out with industry bigwigs who were all there to toast my debut. Josh and Angel helped me laugh off the mean text from Chris's girlfriend. And despite the lift debacle, my reviews were glowing and advance ticket sales skyrocketed, making for some very happy producers. Planet Hollywood even blacked out the wood on the hotel's giant neon sign so that it read Planet Holly for the night. Was I dreaming? Or did this somehow really become my life? Right around the time of my arrival, Planet Hollywood announced an upcoming auction of some of Marilyn Monroe's personal belongings, which would be put on display throughout the casino. When I was asked to model them for an upcoming magazine feature, I couldn't believe my luck. Beyond honored, I modeled many of Marilyn's personal items, which I recognized from famous photos of the star. A white terry cloth bathrobe, an orange Poochie top, a curve-hugging fuchsia day dress, etc. I was fascinated with the quality of the pieces. Things were constructed with so much more care back in Marilyn's time. Even her casual wear was of the highest quality. A few items from Marilyn's movies were in the collection, too. Flushed with excitement, I tried on the original custom-tailored piece intended for her Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend number, a costume that was deemed too risque and was eventually replaced in the film by the iconic pink gown. Much has been said about Marilyn's figure, and, like many women, her weight fluctuated over the years, but this circa 1953 costume fit me like a glove. The flesh-toned leotard was covered with a light fishnet, creating the illusion of being completely nude under the netting. The piece was so well built, the boning carved out my waist without feeling heavy or tight like a typical corset. A handful of rhinestones glittered across the bust, creating a sparkly nude look. It was hard to imagine that any other garment could make me feel sexier. There was one more piece that made a lasting impression on me. After donning a strapless cream colored cocktail dress and a gorgeous amber necklace from Marilyn's personal collection, I was handed a kimono wrap to complete the look. There was no mistaking the frilly violet and pink Edwardian style confection. It was a piece Marilyn wore in The Prince and the Showgirl, the same kimono wrap depicted in my beloved Marilyn Monroe paper doll set all those years earlier. Twirling around in front of the mirror like a little girl, I understood what Cinderella must have felt like when her fairy godmother waved her magic wand and produced the most perfect ball gown. I was in absolute awe. It was surreal to imagine that she had worn these very same pieces decades before me, and how, as a little girl, I shut my eyes and dreamed about what it would feel like to be her for just a moment. And now I knew. Like me, Marilyn had suffered at the hands of some not very nice men. She was used, unappreciated, and struggled to find herself. She worked her way up in Hollywood with stars in her eyes and a kind heart, but found that Hollywood wasn't always as kind in return. She may have been publicly adored, idolized, and lusted after, but she often felt alone and trapped. Those dark demons eventually got the best of Marilyn. Part of me knows that could have easily been my fate had I not chosen to take care of myself. I only wish poor Marilyn could have done the same. Chapter 15. If I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense. Alice in Wonderland. Despite what one might think, creating a world for myself and by myself, independent of Playboy, wasn't all that easy. Why don't you go somewhere else, like Miami? Suggested Brenda, one of my favorite executives. A few weeks after I had returned to Los Angeles after my breakup with Chris, I took a lunch meeting at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills with a few people from to discuss ideas for a possible Girls Next Door spinoff. I don't want to go to Miami, I explained. There's no reason to. I don't have anything to do in Florida. It just doesn't feel organic. What about? Brenda began. She tapped her fork against her plate, trying to drum up some additional non Vegas ideas. Chicago, she finally exclaimed. You could try to take over Playboy, she teased. I smiled at her exuberance. As far-fetched as it sounded, I knew Brenda believed we could make a good show out of something so preposterous. She was one of my biggest champions for my photo editor storyline on Girls Next Door, and really hoped to see season 6 follow the action at Studio West. I needed to let her know that I was going to completely sever ties with the magazine before the conversation went any further. I really want to separate from Playboy and do my own thing, I said before revealing to them my grand plan. I'm going to go to Las Vegas and do a live show. They all stared at me with blank expressions, trying with great care to make sure their faces weren't betraying them. When we sat down for this lunch, I hadn't yet landed Peep Show, but it wasn't hard to read their minds. Holly doesn't have any stage talent. What was she possibly going to do? Okay, so it's not like I had put my best foot forward for the meeting. Still in the midst of my Dancing with the Stars run, I didn't have time to shower before, let alone do laundry. I arrived at the swanky Four Seasons hotel dressed in old jeans, Converse high tops, and a bulky Chris Angel logo emblazoned skull hoodie. Not out of sentimentality, mind you, it's what was clean. Well, we'll see what happens, Brenda offered after what felt like a 10-minute pause. We just have a hard time with Vegas. I gave her a puzzled look. Every season we get a Vegas pilot, she explained, her expression turning more earnest. I'm serious every season, and it never works. Had gambled on Vegas before and lost. I could tell the network wasn't quite ready to jump back in bed with Sin City, but I wasn't willing to alter my vision. After spending most of my adult life playing by someone else's rules, I was finally determined to follow my heart. Shortly after my lunch meeting with the execs, I announced my 3-month residency with Peep Show. Non-believers be damned. When Girls Next Door producers reached out to schedule a date for me to do a cameo in the new season, I was hesitant. I knew they felt that if Bridget, Kendra, and I did these cameos, it would help loyal viewers make the transition and warm up to the new girls. I eventually agreed to have them bring Hef and his new girlfriends to see me in my new review. I hated the idea of associating Playboy with Peep Show and so quickly into my tenure, but the free advertising for Peep Show was just too good to pass up. The transition into the new season wouldn't be easy. To their credit, the producers wanted to populate the cast of season 6 with several playmates in addition to the new girlfriends. They knew that fans of the show wouldn't necessarily warm up to 3 random girls being plopped into our places and thought it would be nice to have a few extra characters in the mix. Hef, however, insisted that Crystal, Carissa, and Christina be the focus of the series as the new girls next door, despite objections that Hef's relationship with the twins reeked of incest. Hef was still convinced that the show would remain popular no matter who he chose to date. In his mind, the girls' personalities didn't matter and certainly didn't contribute to the show's success. It was all about him, after all. I didn't catch much of season 6, not out of spite, mind you. With Peep Show's 6-night-a-week schedule, I didn't have time for TV. However, I did make a point of watching the episode I ended up appearing in and noticed that Crystal didn't pass up any opportunities to take a few unnecessary jabs at me. I like Bridget and Kendra, but Holly, I don't know, one of Crystal's friends whined in a high-pitched, whimpery voice. Crystal giggled and said, "Every time I try talking to her, she's like, woohoo, out to space." Keep in mind, at that point, I had only met Crystal once at Hef's Vegas birthday pool party. She made no attempt to actually speak with me beyond her snotty response to my introduction, but I guess she thought making up lies was an okay thing to do on camera. After all, she was the mansion's head mistress and the star of Girls Next Door now, so surely no one would question her. Producers asked if I would be available to shoot a scene with the Shannon twins during the day, and I agreed. Hef suggested the activity, taking the girls to see his wax figure at Madame Tussauds at the Venetian. Crystal and Hef arrived later at the Palms in Las Vegas to meet the twins, who were doing an autograph signing. Hef greeted them at the table where the signing was set up, while Crystal hung back behind the velvet ropes. As the press cameras started flashing, Crystal bolted around the barricade to participate in the hug fest. "They kind of look like them," Crystal sneered as she walked past the hotel's Playboy retail boutique and spied the Holly, Bridget, and Kendra bobbleheads in the window. Before Peep Show, I was asked to join Hef, Crystal, and the twins in their suite for a family-style buffet dinner. Hef and I hadn't spoken much since our breakup, so seeing him for the first time on camera was a bit uncomfortable. As he went in for an embrace, I clearly opted for the ass-out bro hug and tried to avoid his kiss. When he offered to feed each girlfriend a bite of his ice cream sundae, he turned to offer me a spoonful, which I quickly refused, saying, "Oh, I ordered my own." The girls next door had planned on having us bring Hef up on the stage for our audience participation bit in Peep Show, and the crowd went wild. I played into it as much as I needed to, but was eager to go on with the show. "It seemed like that night, Hef was definitely the main attraction," Crystal quipped in a voice overlay. I knew what it felt like as Hef's girlfriend to be compared to his former flames and feel undervalued or underappreciated, but there was no reason for Crystal to take that out on me with all her snide remarks. When producers summoned Bridget, Kendra, and me to reunite for a Girls Next Door episode featuring Kendra's baby shower, we all agreed without hesitation. Not only were we all grateful for the good things that came from the show and from Hef, we were, at that point, still very supportive of one another. While we had moved on to different places in our lives, we still kept in touch, and deep down there was an undeniable bond that we shared. Mary O'Connor was gracious enough to host the bash in her backyard, and Bridget did a wonderful job of putting the soiree together. It was a perfect little gathering on a beautiful summer's day, until Hef and his girlfriend showed up. The ordeal that ensued was reported by gossip blogger Perez Hilton. Sources tell PerezHilton.com exclusively that there was some major drama at Kendra Wilkinson's baby shower yesterday. We reported earlier that not only were Kendra's BFFs Holly Madison and Bridget Marcourt in attendance, but also Hef and his newest girlfriends, Crystal Harris and the Shannon twins. Apparently, the twins and Crystal put up a major stink about having to be at the party and refused to participate in any of the games by hiding in the house. According to our source, the girls were exceedingly rude to everyone, especially Holly, Bridget, and Kendra, which just made the whole day awkward. And because the episode was being filmed for Girls Next Door and not Kendra, Hef had to have his new ladies included in the footage, so he had them fake a scene where it looked like Kendra was opening her last present when she hadn't even started opening presents, just so they could leave. Once they were gone, we're told the vibe mellowed out and everyone had a wonderful time. Uh-oh, the new gals aren't fans of the veterans we see. Perhaps there's some jealousy that Hef, or America, really likes Holly, Bridget, and Kendra more than these three infants? Occasionally, when I was on my computer, I'd have the TV on in the background. Once, I caught a commercial for the new season of The Girls Next Door. I'm not the new Holly, she's the old me, Crystal snapped sassily in the season's first promotional trailer. Ouch, I thought when I first heard it. Honestly, I didn't even blame Crystal for the snide remark. I'd been in that same interview chair for 5 long seasons before she even came along, and I assume the producers fed her that line. Crystal just didn't come off as comfortable or clever enough to think up even a lame zinger like that. In fact, most of her dialogue on the show was painfully awkward at best. I was terribly disappointed in the producers. For 4 years, I had literally bared my life for that show, but as soon as I left, they were taking pot shots at me. There is no doubt in my mind that had the new cast succeeded and the show remained on the air, they would still be bagging on me to this day if it was good for ratings. From the reports I read and the little I did see, season 6 felt like a stale rehash of old storylines mixed with some of the ideas we had tossed around but had not gotten around to using over the years, like camping in the backyard. And when promos began airing, I couldn't help but see my name popping up on websites and blogs because of some hurtful jab being made at my expense. It felt like they were trying to encourage a war between the old and new guard. Or perhaps they felt that by throwing our names around as often as possible, they could distract viewers and keep them from realizing what a snore fest the once energetic and bubbly series had become. When asked in an interview what I thought of the new season, I was honest. Maybe I should have just said that I hadn't seen any of it, but the constant jabs had begun gnawing at me. After all, I'm only human. The girls need to focus on what makes them unique and not doing the same things Bridget, Kendra, and I have already done on the show, I said candidly. I don't want to look behind. I want to look forward. A week later, I received a letter from Hef reprimanding me for my remarks. Hef loved to send letters. Prior to sending one, he'd usually make a copy and place it neatly in one of his countless scrapbooks. I don't think he writes the letters with the purpose of getting a response or closure, which is why I never bothered to respond. I think he does it so he can have the last word in even the tiniest event in the story of his life. It's Hef's version of reality, all the time. When I filmed a guest spot on Kendra's self-titled spin-off, my former housemate confessed to me off camera that she got disapproving letters from Hef fairly regularly as well. She told me she was forced to apologize for a quote she gave the media referring to the whores up there at the mansion, which Hef assumed referred to the Shannon twins. I would end up receiving many reprimand letters from Hef. It seemed nothing I said in the press met his approval. The whole thing felt sort of creepy, as if he thought he was my dad or something and had some sort of jurisdiction over me. Eventually, when I would see letters from the mansion in my mail, I would throw them away without even opening them. They just creeped me out and brought forth negative feelings. I didn't want him to have that sort of power over me. Meanwhile, I was taking Las Vegas by storm. Peep Show had quickly become the Vegas Strip's new smash hit. Ticket sales skyrocketed, prompting producers to sign me on through the end of the year. I couldn't believe it. I knew how hard I had worked trying to make the show and my performance as successful as possible, and it actually paid off. Speaking of paying off, I was finally doing well financially. Actually, very well. I signed a multi-million-dollar contract with Peep Show, and even my breasts were insured with Lloyd's of London for $1 million. Not bad for a $7,000 investment. People assumed I had been rich beyond my wildest dreams at the mansion and that I must be struggling to get by in my post Playboy life. But in reality, that couldn't have been further from the truth. I was carving out a pretty unique niche for myself, and the quirkiness of my new showgirl life was becoming hard to ignore. I had been called one of the most in demand and beloved celebrities in Las Vegas by the Los Angeles Times. Performing full time in a live show made me different from all the other talent on E! Most reality show starlets on TV at that time were LA girls with a passion for fashion, so being a new kind of Vegas showgirl at least set me apart from all the others. In the summer of 2009, I began seriously discussing a spin off with E! I was determined to make Vegas work. Luckily, Brenda gave the idea another chance and we started exploring themes for a potential series. Season 6 of The Girls Next Door was a total disaster. After viewers saw what they were getting on the season premiere, most never tuned back in. The new girlfriends only pulled about half the ratings we did in previous seasons. When the new show ended in August, E! Pulled the plug on what had been, less than a year earlier, their number one series. In an effort to recapture some of the Girls Next Door loyalists, who were tuning in by the droves to Kendra, the network greenlit production for a pilot that would serve as an E! Special that December called Holly's World. My initial vision for the show was Legally Blonde meets a PG-rated version of Showgirls. Peep Show wasn't enough for me. I wanted my day job to be interning at the mayor's office, learning how to run the city. My pilot centered on a silly plot. Me visiting the mayor's office with a complaint about road work, resulting in my friends and me going on several misadventures trying to collect signatures for a petition. It was a roundabout way of introducing the people in my life, what I wanted to do, and taking a tour of some unlikely spots and meeting some strange people in the city. I didn't necessarily assume that my pilot would rate that well. I wasn't an energetic, ditzy, made for reality TV blonde like Kendra. I was quiet and reserved and much preferred reading a book to shaking my ass. While I knew my lifestyle was unique, would anyone really care? When I received word that the special had not only done well, but that E! Wanted to order an entire season, my jaw hit the floor. Of course, that was what I had hoped for, but I certainly hadn't expected it. It was official. Holly's World was a go. In my head, I thought it was going to be my version of the Mary Tyler Moore show. Girl moves to a new city post breakup in order to make it on her own. With shooting to begin in early 2010, our first order of business was to lock down the cast. The three friends I had chosen to appear in my pilot were asked back for the full season. Angel Perino, my bestie and new assistant, Josh Strickland, my charismatic Peep Show co star, and Laura Croft, my crazy roommate, rounded out the crew. Anxious to begin this Playboy free chapter of my life, I was eager to sort out contract negotiations as quickly as possible and begin filming. However, like a bad dream, my past continued to haunt me, and the contracts we had to sign while at the mansion carried over into my new spin off with E! It was a lot of baggage to move forward with, but I was in a hurry to get going. And, conditioned by all those years at the mansion, I still wasn't strong enough to hold my ground for long. I had grown a lot in the last year and a half, but I still had a long way to go. At the start of 2010, cameras began following our wild lives in Sin City as sexy singles looking to balance our wild Vegas social calendars with performances 6 nights a week. And like all reality shows, it wasn't without its fair share of drama. I was pressured heavily by production to put my dating life on camera, and I stubbornly refused. I agreed to film a blind date episode, but anyone I dated in real life was strictly off limits at this point. I was sick of being thought of as Hugh Hefner's ex, and the distasteful way I felt like Chris used me for publicity had left a bad taste in my mouth, so I was determined to stand on my own and not publicize my love life. If I was even asked about a rumored romance on camera, I denied it. This resulted in more than one argument between production and me, but I refused to give in. Over the course of the first season, I bought a house and Angel and her new son Roman moved in. We traveled to Mexico to shoot a calendar, went on a road trip with Bridget, and Kendra paid a visit for a baseball episode. The show followed Angel as she got breast implants and Josh as he went to New York to audition for a new Broadway show. Overall, it was a fun, heartwarming season, and the three of us had a blast. Viewers connected with Josh and Angel. They loved Angel's and my chemistry and Josh's endless energy. Laura was the weakest link of the cast. She was crazy and funny in real life, but on TV, she was ordinary. In my time, I've seen boring, snotty people come off as the life of the party on television, too, which just goes to show that reality TV isn't really reality. Before the show's 2010 debut, the cast and I were swept into a photo studio to shoot promotional photos for the series. Each sequence was more fun than the last. The cast strutting down a yellow brick road version of the Las Vegas Strip, me being shot from above, twirling in a pink dress atop a large cartoon graphic of the city, and me perched on a larger than life disco ball rising from the city's skyline. E was rolling out the red carpet. For me, it felt like a dream come true. Shortly before the show aired, E flew me to Los Angeles to shoot video promos for the network. All the network stars were required to shoot. Ryan Seacrest and Juliana Rancic, the Kardashian sisters, Kendra and Hank, and me. Everyone's really excited about your show. They're all talking about it, the makeup artist said, putting the finishing touches on my Marilyn-inspired look. You're the only one who's getting to be in a shot by yourself. You're so lucky. She was right. Everyone else was being shot with their co stars or co anchors, and I would be the only E personality featured solo, wearing a black version of the Marilyn Monroe 7 Year Itch wind-blown gown and elegant opera length gloves. Oh my God, it's like so nice to meet you, squealed a young, skinny brunette as she swept into my dressing room, seemingly taking stock of the hair, makeup, and wardrobe paraphernalia thrown everywhere. We loved Girls Next Door, her buxom companion gushed. Totally, the skinnier one jumped in. Like, when I first got an agent, I told him I want to be on the Girls Next Door. She babbled, her head bobbing from side to side as she spoke. And then he was like, no, you need your own reality show. Oh, thanks, that's sweet, I responded as an E executive motioned to me from the doorway, ready to whisk me off to set. Nice to meet you. I'm sure I will see you around. Certain we were a safe distance from my dressing room, I turned to him and whispered, who were those girls? Oh, they're the Arlington sisters, he stated matter-of-factly as if I should have heard of them. When I gave him a blank look, he continued. Did you hear about those robberies in the Hollywood Hills? He asked, his voice taking on a very Hollywood sales pitch tone. All the celebrity houses like Paris Hilton's, they're the ones that did those. He said that as if it were a perfectly reasonable claim to fame. Needless to say, some of the network talent wasn't necessarily thrilled to be sharing the spotlight with these young felons. Say what you will about how some of us became household names, none of us got there by breaking and entering. The world of famous for being famous was getting weirder and weirder. Holly's World premiered to excellent ratings, nearly 2 million viewers. And talk of a second season was practically immediate. Between filming the series, watching it unfold on air, and performing 6 nights a week, 2010 went by in a blur. My Turn and Peep show had garnered such fabulous reviews over my first 18 months that I moved from the 3-month contracts the show had offered me initially to signing a full-year commitment, and had even begun singing lessons so that I could take on an additional role in the production. On top of all that, I had a new gig as the Las Vegas correspondent for the entertainment news show Extra. I had little spare time, but was still managing to have a blast. I was finally standing on my own. Ratings were so strong for Holly's World, they were even surpassing those of Kendra's latest season. In fact, there was only one attempt to include a Playboy related plotline in that first season. When producers suggested the cast and I stop by Hef's annual birthday party at the Palms, I wasn't particularly opposed to it. While I wasn't jumping out of my chair to go spend time with Hef and Crystal, particularly after I watched her spiteful Girls Next Door character unfold, I knew that fans loved those sort of on camera reunions. The Holly's World cast arrived at the Hef suite at the Palms for the 80s themed soiree, which I assumed was a not so subtle wink to Hef's age, in costume. Hef seemed genuinely delighted to see us, as did Mary and a few of the girls I had known from my mansion days. Crystal, however, barely made her presence known. New playmate Claire Sinclair, a Barbie Benton look-alike, acted as a go-between for a pouting Crystal, who spent much of the party tucked upstairs and away from cameras despite being swathed in a stunning Barachi gown and dolled up to the nines. Hef's new number one girl seemed to resent having anything to do with my show, especially since her show, Girls Next Door Season 6, had been canceled. The Shannon twins had since departed the mansion. According to the rumor mill, Carissa and Christina were wild and never really good at adhering to the rules. I can't imagine Crystal was disappointed to see the magnetic twosome go. In their place was a new girlfriend, a gorgeous, baby-faced blonde named Anna Sophia Berglund. Hef's birthday party eventually moved to Moon Nightclub. When Josh and I arrived back at the Palms after doing 2 performances of Peep Show, we entered the club and situated ourselves in our designated booth, just a row over from Hef's table. Immediately, he spotted us and with a big smile on his face, waved to us with both arms and the enthusiasm of a little kid. "It looks like he's signaling for help," Josh observed. "He looks bored." He did look a little bored and eager for the cameras to make their way over. Crystal was supposed to have sung Happy Birthday for Hef at midnight, something Bridget had done at his party the previous year, but she didn't end up performing. Knowing Hef, he clearly was waiting for his on-camera moment. After downing a round of drinks, we made our way over to his booth. Suddenly, one of Hef's security stopped us. "Sorry," the hulking guard said. "The boss wants to leave." We couldn't have been there for more than 15 minutes. What was this guy talking about, I thought. And just then, bright security flashlights whizzed past us, leading Hef's entourage out of the club. 2 playmates, Jen and Kim, walked by us looking truly embarrassed and mouthed, "Sorry." Next came an angry-looking Crystal, who avoided any eye contact with us, dragging a dazed and confused-looking Hef, who shuffled along behind her. "What happened?" I asked the guard. "I don't know," he shrugged. "I just got the word they were leaving." It was so unlike Hef to miss even a short chance to be in front of the cameras that I was actually concerned. He lived for that sort of attention. He didn't look unwell, but I asked the Playboy publicists about it anyway. They assured me that Hef was perfectly fine and his sudden departure had nothing to do with his health. It didn't take a rocket scientist to put the pieces together. Crystal's neurotic behavior and canceled performance, combined with being forced to participate in my reality show and Hef's overzealousness to see us, you do the math. Oh well, I thought. Hef loved any chance to be on TV, and he loved Girls Next Door nostalgia. To me, though, it didn't matter whether we got the nightclub scene or not. If he didn't want to film it, it was his loss. Unlike Hef, I didn't enjoy living in the past. I was young and living for the present and future. I couldn't help but think of Hef spending the better part of 5 seasons pounding into Bridget's, Kendra's, and my heads that we were replaceable, that the show would be just as successful in our absence. With Kendra and Holly's World pulling in solid ratings and being renewed for additional seasons, and Girls Next Door fading quietly into the night, it appeared we weren't so replaceable after all. Chapter 16. I do hope it's my dream and not the Red King's. I don't like belonging to another person's dream. Lewis Carroll, Through the Looking Glass. Even the most magical fairy tale isn't complete without a villain, and one was about to arrive in Holly's World. E was thrilled with the performance of the first season of Holly's World and promptly ordered a second season. To satiate the viewer demand, the network scheduled production to begin in fall 2010 in order to meet a January 2011 premiere date. In the television industry, fall and winter premieres are reserved for the more established shows, while summer premieres tend to be for untested programming. The shift forward was a huge move for a little reality show that could. Unfortunately, not every E show saw such great success. Earlier that year, Hef had delivered a pilot to E titled The Bunny House that he hoped would be the second coming of the girls next door and keep Playboy and himself on air. The show followed the exploits of five Playboy playmates as they lived in a plush pad across the street from the mansion: Claire Sinclair, Hope Dworasek, Crystal McCahill, Jamie Edmondson, and Jade Nicole. Claire, the Barbie Benton doppelganger, and I had become friends. Not only was she beautiful and sweet, she actually had a brain in her head. I had met Hope and Crystal during the anniversary playmate search a few years earlier, while Jamie was new to the mansion fold. She had an interesting history. She'd been everything from an NFL cheerleader to a police officer to a contestant on CBS's The Amazing Race. Then there was 2008's Playmate of the Year and the show's official mean girl, Jade. The ex-girlfriend of reality star Brody Jenner, she had already spent some time in front of cameras during the final season of MTV's The Hills. In the wake of her breakup, Jade had been trying to shop around her own pilot with no luck, but the network loved the idea of a girl you love to hate character, so when producers got wind of that, they placed her in the bunny house as the resident shit stirrer. The pilot followed a recreation of Claire's Playmate test shoot at Studio West, with Crystal seated purposefully in my former perch, viewing the instantly uploaded images on a computer monitor and shouting words of encouragement as I used to do when I directed the shoots, and a group trip to Las Vegas for Hope's Playmate of the Year celebration. But between Kendra and Holly's World, there was just too much Playboy produced content on E, and the pilot wasn't picked up to series. However, there were those who remained obsessed with the idea of resurrecting Girls Next Door, so Claire and Jade were planted on Holly's World in hopes that their characters would gain enough popularity among viewers that E would be forced to revisit the bunny house concept. I had virtually no choice in the matter, but I wasn't particularly bothered by it at first. Producers insisted that, per E, the show needed more drama, and Jade had signed on to the show knowing she was going to play the bad girl. Honestly, that made my job much easier. I was happy to let her be the drama queen. Unlike Girls Next Door, where negativity was forbidden, most reality shows require some dramatic elements. How can you have an interesting story without conflict? Oftentimes, producers will guide the storylines, encourage talent to make provocative statements, and edit things together to increase the overall tension of the series. If producers had a predetermined villain, then we wouldn't need to manufacture trouble between the existing cast, who, at the time, were my closest friends. Plus, I didn't feel threatened. I was sure E would never order the bunny house. As for Claire, she was a natural fit for Holly's World, not because of her Playboy connection, but because she was a budding Vegas showgirl herself who had just signed on for a guest run at MGM's Crazy Horse Paris review. While we took a break from filming during the holidays, Hef and Crystal had become engaged. Right on cue, the media firestorm began citing that I was reportedly devastated upon hearing the news. Actually, I was probably one of the few people in the world not at all surprised that Hef was getting remarried. Hef's youngest son, Cooper, turned 18 that year, providing Hef the green light he felt he needed to divorce Kimberly, despite the fact they had already been separated for nearly 13 years. Plus, with Girls Next Door no longer on the air, Hef needed an incentive to once again reinvent himself and garner headlines. I understand why people thought I would be upset. For 5 seasons, it appeared as though I wanted nothing more than Hef to myself, a big white wedding, and the mansion hallways echoing with pitter-patter of tiny feet. In the media, our breakup played out as if I was unable to tame the ultimate bachelor, only to have him propose to the next blonde that shoved her way into the mansion. The truth was, I couldn't have cared less. The happier Hef was without me, the more quickly I could disassociate myself. It could have easily been me walking down that aisle, and I was grateful to have gotten the hell out of there. Long after I left, a friend of Hef's confided to me that Hef kept saying he had no idea why I chose to leave. All you had to do was stick around until Cooper turned 18, he said with a pointed look. But I don't care anymore. That's not what I want, I responded. So few people seemed to realize that I had woken up from the spell I had been under a long time ago. The few years I had been out of the mansion had been the best of my life so far. If I had married Hef, I wouldn't have had any of that. My life would have been over. Don't you miss the mansion? A dreamy eyed girl asked me during one of my peep show meet and greets. I would often get this question, and it continued to amaze me how many women were cast under this Playboy spell. There I was, headlining on the Vegas Strip, making millions of dollars a year all on my own, and starring in my own television show. And they wondered if I missed living by an archaic set of rules with a spoiled old man old enough to be my grandfather. Were they crazy? After hearing this over and over again, I began to realize that what viewers took away from The Girls Next Door was nothing like what life there was really like. When it was suggested we film an episode of Holly's World at the mansion so I could congratulate Hef on his engagement, I actually jumped at the chance. This was my opportunity to show viewers that I wasn't at all devastated by Hef's engagement. In fact, I was happy that he was moving on and wished him well. Regardless of how I felt about Crystal, I never for a moment wanted to trade places with her. I thought it was important for people to know that. It was an eerily quiet day at the mansion when I arrived to film my congratulations scene with Hef. An extra large dollhouse occupied the great hall, a gift I had commissioned for Hef shortly before I left. The piece was an exact replica of the home he had grown up in Chicago in the early part of the last century. When Hef arrived to shoot the scene, he spent a lot of time fussing over the dollhouse. Eventually, Crystal made her way downstairs in a cozy looking long sleeved shirt. I congratulated her as well. She seemed different to me that day, calm and friendly, low key, as if there wasn't a negative bone in her body. Maybe she's finally growing into herself, I thought. It was nice to see that side of Crystal. Perhaps I had judged her too harshly. Maybe they'll actually be good for each other after all. I returned to Vegas that night and went back to finishing season 2 of Holly's World. The second season was even more memorable than the first. The producers found a couple of private investigators to track down Josh's birth mother, whom he had never met and knew nothing about. When Josh and Angel went to Charleston, Josh's hometown, everyone thought we were at the start of a long quest to find his real mother. No one actually expected her to turn up right away. The investigators came through, and the episode turned out to be one of the most genuinely surprising and emotional ones of the series. I let Angel go as my assistant and gave her the role of my understudy in Peep Show. She also landed a small role in another strip production due to an audition that was planned and filmed for the show. Laura was mostly prompted by producers to hang out with Jade so that our resident villain had an excuse to be intertwined into our storylines. Though the show was better than ever, I found myself growing more and more distant from my closest friends. With my crazy work schedule, Josh was really the only person from the show that I regularly saw off camera, and that was only because we were in Peep Show together. It was clear that if there was a season 3, Laura wasn't necessarily going to get invited back due to her failure to connect with the audience. I wondered if she would choose to stay in Vegas if that were the case. Meanwhile, Angel, who was loved on the show, was growing more and more distant from me. I rarely saw her anymore, and she seemed to make a point of hanging out with anyone but me, Josh, or Laura. She spent most of her time at her mom's house, leaving her and Roman's things in each of their rooms at my house. I began to sense something was wrong. Her attitude changed too. She'd come a long way professionally since joining the Holly's World cast, and I thought I had helped her get so many things she could want, but maybe those were just things I would have wanted at her age. Obviously, something was a bad fit because she didn't seem happy anymore. The carefree, fun-loving angel who used to light up my days was gone. While my cast was handling their newfound places in the spotlight in different ways, I kept busy with work and foolishly pushed my concern about my friends aside. We'll deal with that when next season's negotiations come up, I thought. The future seemed so bright that I was sure everything would just repair itself eventually. Claire was the front runner for 2011's Playmate of the Year, and it was suggested that since she and I had become so close, I resurrect my role as Playboy's photo editor for the pictorial as a special contributor. Despite how desperate I was to get away from Playboy, I actually liked this idea since it put the spotlight on my professional, not personal, involvement with the magazine. Given her very era specific look and curves, I began planning the shoot in my head. A vintage Betty Page inspired feature using the plush red Crazy Horse Theater as a backdrop. We couldn't wait to get started. As the shoot dates drew nearer, I was excitedly explaining the project to Josh when I got a call from one of the producers. With a heavy sigh, he dropped the bomb on me that we were no longer filming Claire's pictorial. Why? I asked, hoping it was just a silly mix up that could easily be fixed. I heard him take a deep breath and exhale. He explained that Hef had just called him and said that Crystal and I had a Twitter fight and that she was really upset about it. He said she threw a fit about it and that Hef had no choice but to take me off the pictorial. Ugh, I groaned. I had heard through the grapevine that Crystal was still moping around the mansion because she had her show taken away and was upset that I was the one still on television. Any suggestion of my presence anywhere near Playboy sent Crystal into a frenzy. What happened to the laid back Crystal I had seen the last time I visited the mansion? Are you serious? We didn't get into a fight, I snapped, exasperated by her immaturity. Someone on Twitter pointed out that she copied my underwater photo shoot, and later I made a generic post about hating copycats. That's it. I didn't even mention her name or reply to the person who pointed it out. I'm sorry that she has a guilty conscience, I huffed, rolling my eyes. Over the past few years, I definitely began to feel that for whatever reason, Crystal was trying to single white female me. And I'm sorry that she can't deal with people's comments on the internet. Crystal had no clue what to do besides follow in my footsteps. Crystal even started copying my private life. I was a little creeped out. She became an overnight Disney fanatic, made a point of tracking down and befriending my old buddy Brittany, who had long ago ceased being a mansion regular, and started spending her days with her. Crystal acquired the seemingly requisite boob and nose job shortly after moving into the mansion, and after her plastic makeover, Hef handed her a December 2010 centerfold. This was a stark contrast to how the centerfolds had been held far, far away from me and most of the girls I had cohabitated with, but I suppose Hef felt that giving Crystal a centerfold to shoot on Girls Next Door was safer than giving her a celebrity pictorial like he had given me, Bridget, and Kendra. Or perhaps he was finally playing fair for a change and putting her on the same level as the twins, who knows? The first photo in her spread looked a lot like the opener from my final self-directed pictorial for February 2009, standing back to camera naked in between two theater doors. The rest of the pictorial was very old Hollywood, complete with the same style of monogrammed pillows I had requested for a Girls Next Door calendar shoot 2 years earlier. Sure, the fact that it was December, my birthday month and favorite time of year, could have been purely coincidental, but I know how painstakingly produced every last detail of these shoots were, including the hat that sat next to Crystal in her centerfold, a fedora adorned with a single sprig of holly. Even her Playmate video had been filmed at my favorite location, the spot I fought so hard to secure for my final pictorial, the Los Angeles Theater. Knowing how expensive it was to shoot video there, they must have spared no expense to get it done. It was weird. Clearly, I wasn't the only one recognizing these coincidences. I constantly saw fans on Twitter tagging Crystal and me, saying that Crystal was copying me. Crystal must have seen them too. I was disgusted with both Crystal and Hef. He knew how much I enjoyed producing these pictorials, and he took the project away from me as a form of punishment. The producer sighed and said he was really looking forward to covering this shoot. I knew he was telling the truth. The crew and I had known each other for years, and we all seemed to especially enjoy doing the photo shoot episodes. Me too, I conceded. He suggested, with a momentary flicker of hope in his voice, that all I would have to do is call and apologize to Hef and Crystal. No way, I exclaimed. Why should I have to apologize when I didn't do anything wrong? That's idiotic. If you wanted me to direct the pictorial and have it featured on the show, that decision should be separate from any drama Crystal and he are having. Forget it. Knowing Hef as I do, I'm sure part of him got off on the fact that Crystal was jealous and insecure. If I were to engage in this one-sided battle, I'd only give him the satisfaction of feeling fought over. No, thank you. I can just see his scrapbook entry now. Hef cancels Holly's shoot with Claire due to a fight Crystal and Holly had over Hef. He always referred to himself in third person in the scrapbook captions. The whole thing is so bizarre. In your dreams, pal. As season 2 of Holly's World wrapped, Lifetime TV was preparing a special on Hef and Crystal's upcoming June wedding, but it wasn't to go on as planned. Crystal ended up running out on Hef 5 days before the 300 guest ceremony was set to take place. The crew was left with nothing to film. I couldn't begin to imagine how mortified Hef must have felt. Hef's friends and many playmates were in an uproar, denouncing Crystal, sometimes publicly on social media. Kendra and I were asked to film a scene with Hef to help fill time in the special, which was now titled Hef's Runaway Bride. I did it as a favor to production, the same people behind Girls Next Door and Holly's World, not Hef, though I do have to admit, despite all the negative things I had been through with the guy, I did feel bad for him after such a public humiliation. I wasn't interested in showing up to say I told you so regarding Crystal. I just wanted to try and be a friend. I flew into LA the day of the shoot and arrived at the mansion early to wait for the production crew in the unusually silent Great Hall. Suddenly, a bleary-eyed blonde wearing a pair of Hef's oversized aqua silk pajamas and a noticeable case of bedhead appeared at the top of the stairs. "Excuse me," asked Shara Bashard, a recent playmate who had obviously just wandered out of Hef's bedroom. "How do I take the dog out?" She pointed down at a King Charles Spaniel the dog Crystal had left behind, who was sitting at her feet. You just open the door and take him outside?" I said, trying my best not to sound condescending. It was a strange question with an obvious answer, but then again, the mansion was such a bizarre place, it would have been easy to assume that there was probably a weird ritual involved with taking one of the mansion's dogs outside. Thankfully, the crew showed up and ushered me down to Mary's office, saving me from that awkward exchange with Hef's latest concubine. As Kendra and I sat in her mansion office, Mary explained that she had received a call from Crystal when Crystal was at the jazz festival. Crystal confided in her that she was really nervous. Mary said she had asked her if the problem was Anna. Anna was one of the two girls Hef was supposedly dating when he was settling down with Crystal. And Crystal had said no, that she loved Anna. Mary just shrugged and said she didn't know what happened between Crystal and Hef. By then, we had all heard the gossip that Hef and Crystal couldn't come to terms on a prenup, leaving them at a stalemate just days before the wedding. So, Crystal decided to up and leave, straight into the arms of her secret boyfriend, Jordan McGraw, the son of Dr. Phil. What would he have to say about this little love triangle? One celebrity news site even revealed that she had moved in with him. It was the giant elephant in the room, but neither Kendra nor I breathed a word of it. After all, we had a film crew surrounding us, and we all implicitly knew that the topic was not something Hef would allow to be included in the special. Kendra and I sat down with Hef in the mansion library, a room I had been in a zillion times before, but I had never been this uncomfortable. Despite the years that had passed, there we were, Bridget, Kendra, and me hanging on the wall. It was a photo from our first pictorial, the three of us piled naked on top of one another. Living at the mansion, you start to get desensitized to those sorts of things. Nude photos, no matter how explicit, had all started to look the same to me. But after being away from Playboy for 3 years, the photo that had once seemed so silly and playful struck me for the first time as incredibly pornographic, which of course was the original intention behind the image in the first place. Who knows, I may have been the one that initially had the thing framed, but by that point I was embarrassed that that photo was still up there for all to see. Hef confessed while looking directly at me that he proposed to Crystal to avoid making the same mistake he had with me. I remained as stoic as possible, just nodding solemnly like a robot. Giving him or viewers false hope was the last thing I wanted to do. We each gave him a hug, offered him our condolences and words of encouragement, and then let him get back to his paperwork. The Lifetime special flopped. No one was invested in Crystal and Hef as a couple, and unlike the ferocious media storm, the special failed to mention the other man Crystal was involved with. Though the scandal made a splash in the press, most people who didn't know Hef brushed it off as a publicity stunt. Trust me, Hef may be a publicity whore, but he would never risk his own bulletproof ladies' man reputation for the sake of a headline. Crystal, on the other hand, didn't have as much reverence for his public image. According to a report in the New York Post's gossip column, page 6, Hugh Hefner's wedding to Crystal Harris was called off after she secretly planned to ditch the Playboy mogul at the altar in return for a $500,000 media deal, page 6 has exclusively learned. A source told us Crystal wanted to ditch Hef at the altar. Her plan was to walk up the aisle and say she couldn't go through with it. The wedding was to be filmed for a reality special, and her refusal to marry him would be a sensation. She was looking for a tie-in deal of around $500,000 for the exclusive I Ditched Hef at the Altar interview. While there was interest, Crystal didn't get an offer anywhere near $500,000. Crystal continued to milk any ounce of publicity she could get for months. Promoting her Playboy cover, the July 2011 cover had been designed to showcase Hef's newest wife, but at the last minute, a sticker reading Runaway Bride had to be slapped over the top of it so the magazine wouldn't look dreadfully out of step and could simultaneously capitalize on the scandal. And Girls Next Door Season 6's DVD release, despite barely being in any of the episodes, Bridget, Kendra, and I were on the front of the box along with Crystal and the twins in an attempt to sell more copies. She appeared at a Heidi Montag hosted pool party, publicly pawned her engagement ring, hired an animal lawyer to get back the dog she left at the mansion months earlier, and made a well-publicized visit to Howard Stern. In the graphic interview, she told Stern that sex with Hef lasted like 2 seconds. Then I was just over it. I'm not turned on by Hef, sorry. Even from Las Vegas, I'm pretty sure I could see the steam shooting out of Hef's ears. Nothing gets under his skin more than someone doubting his sexual prowess. Unable to keep quiet and in a desperate attempt to salvage his Lothario reputation, Hef fired back at Crystal via a series of tweets. Crystal did a crazy interview with Howard Stern today that didn't have much to do with reality. Is she trying to impress a new boyfriend? The sex with Crystal the first night was good enough so that I kept her over 2 more nights. Sure, her turn on Stern was a low blow, but I was disappointed to see Hef stoop to her level. In the end, they both lost that war. When the headlines disappeared, her new relationship ended, and people stopped caring about Hugh Hefner's ex-fiancé, Crystal came back to the mansion with her tail between her legs, and the pair wed in a low-key wedding ceremony on December 31st, 2013. There certainly must have been a measure of satisfaction for Hef's ego. The woman who had so publicly embarrassed him ended up crawling back after all, just like he had tried to convince me to do after I met Chris. My guest appearance on Hef's Runaway Bride was the last time I ever saw Hef or spoke to him. I continued to receive letters from him after that, but I just threw them away because they were always only about him anyway. 3 years after breaking off the relationship, I could finally say he was out of my life for good. Despite another season of stellar ratings for Holly's World, seeing a series high of nearly 2.5 million viewers, the show was canceled. E welcomed a new president at the same time who decided she no longer wanted the network to be in business with Playboy. "We want to get rid of the trashy Playboy element," she was quoted as saying. This hurt since I'd been trying so hard for the past few years to separate myself from that brand. Kendra's show was canceled shortly after mine. Sure, Playboy got me on television, but it was also because of Playboy that I was taken off television. Many people assume Playboy was my blessing, but most don't know it was also my curse. Truth be told, I was devastated by the cancellation. The cast, production, and I continued to bring in the ratings for the network, but Playboy cast a shadow over my life and I couldn't escape it. I felt terrible that I could no longer provide my castmates with the spots on the show that had brought them so much success. I felt like the giving tree after the tree was reduced to a stump and had nothing left to give anyone. I was worried that I would lose all my friends once they learned that Holly's World was to be no more. Of course, that didn't turn out to be the case. Josh and I, for example, remained and still are as close as ever. Angel and I suffered an estrangement for a few years, but sometimes that's what success can do to friendships. I felt like I had just begun landing lucrative endorsements and turning my press coverage around. People had finally started saying, "We love you on Holly's World," instead of, "We loved you on The Girls Next Door." I was scared that with the show's cancellation, my positive momentum could be stopped dead in its tracks. "Just do it," my friend advised me. "They're going to make it whether you want them to or not. You may as well have your voice in there." In 2011, E executives asked me to film for their True Hollywood Story franchise. I'd been interviewed for the program before, but this time the entire episode was going to be about me. While the idea of having your own True Hollywood Story might be a sign to some that you've made it, I felt wildly underqualified and the prospect horrified me. But I haven't even accomplished anything yet, I thought. My story wasn't ready to be told. I hadn't achieved enough on my own outside of the mansion, and I didn't want the hour-long program to be a tribute to my days at Playboy. But after talking it out, I realized I didn't really have a choice in the matter. Eventually, I gave the network my cooperation. In retrospect, I feel so sorry for the poor producer forced to interview me. I did not make her job easy. I felt like I had nothing but a trail of mistakes and embarrassments to confess on camera, save for the previous 2 years, so I was perhaps the grumpiest, bitchiest, most emotional mess that had ever sat down for a true Hollywood story about her life. The last subject she had interviewed for the series was Katy Perry, who was no doubt upbeat, but she's someone who's really accomplished things. I was so insecure. I worried that my life story would be presented as that of just another famous for nothing Playboy bimbo. Naturally, Hef was interviewed for the special. You really think he would miss a chance to be on camera? And his only real contribution was a chippy remark at my expense. "What I thought I had found in Holly, I really found in Crystal," he had said to the interviewer, as if that was in any way relevant to my story. He just couldn't resist an opportunity to belittle me and make the story all about him. But when the special finally aired, something interesting happened. People actually related to me. To my surprise, viewers sympathized with my unhappiness, and some even said that they found the courage to reinvent themselves in their own lives. Inspired by my story, some women told me they were able to remove themselves from difficult situations, get over a breakup, or find the motivation to get healthy. I was and continue to be truly humbled. Through these wonderful, honest people, I was able to reevaluate how I viewed my own past and maybe give myself a bit of a break. Perhaps sharing my story wasn't such a bad idea, I thought. Maybe I wasn't defined by the mistakes I had made after all. Maybe those decisions were what allowed me to become the person I was always destined to be. Chapter 17. It's no use going back to yesterday because I was a different person then. Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. "Kendra appear in Peep Show? You're kidding me, right?" I laughed, barely able to believe the suggestion. Before now, I've never spoken publicly about my falling out with Kendra. There were people looking to capitalize on the deterioration of our friendship, and I refused to allow them to benefit from it. Throwing away a relationship for cheap publicity isn't cute. After E canceled both Kendra and Holly's World, Kendra's series was picked up by a smaller cable network. When production started brainstorming ideas for Kendra's new show, they called me and asked if I would like to participate. Always the girls next door's biggest fans, the producers wanted to keep the team together in any capacity they could. Of course, I assured them. While there wasn't necessarily any upside for me to appear on her show, Bridget, Kendra, and I routinely made cameos on one another's programs. For us, it was a no brainer. That's simply what friends do. Besides, it was fun. When I was presented with plot lines to participate in, I was less than thrilled with the options. I wanted to make sure that my appearance on her series felt organic, but I was beginning to get the impression that there was a hidden agenda. Early into our conversations, they latched on to one particular idea that they wouldn't shake. They insisted that the network wanted sexy, that they wanted career, and that they needed help with that because at that point, Kendra wasn't either of those things. One of them asked me to offer Kendra the role as my peep show understudy for a week-long stint. Besides being a total rehash of a storyline we had done for Holly's World with Angel, there was a whole host of reasons I wasn't comfortable with that happening. I had worked hard to help make Peep Show a success and considered it a huge part of my post Playboy identity. I felt that to show Kendra performing in Peep Show on television, even if it were only for one night, would create the impression that it was just another Playboy related venture that was handed to any Girls Next Door alumnus. Couldn't I have anything of my own? They continued to gripe, saying Kendra has no ambition, didn't do anything but sit on the couch, and had truly become famous for nothing. Over the past 3.5 years, Peep Show had become my baby. I busted my ass to create a successful post mansion life for myself, and I wasn't going to just hand over the reins for a chance to be on a show roughly 40 people would end up watching. Okay, maybe a little more than 40. It felt like I was being used. Despite sharing a friendship and a common experience at the mansion, Kendra and I were still very much different people. There were times when I was compared to her and encouraged to follow Kendra's method, but it just wasn't me. While she was quite a bit more mainstream than I was, her career moves consisted of things like releasing an old sex tape or coming out with a line of lubricants. While her tabloid coverage focused on positive things like her wedding and baby her first year out of the mansion, lately her headlines had devolved to negative things like Why I Left Hank, Kendra Loses Her Baby, Kendra's Secret Breakdown, and Sex Tape Scandal. No thanks. Since she moved into the mansion at 19 years old, Kendra had never had to work for a thing her entire adult life. She went directly from having cameras follow her as Hugh Hefner's girlfriend to cameras following her being a football wife. Luckily for her, whether it was Hef or Hank, there was always someone around to rescue her. Were they seriously asking me to simply hand over the career I had built by myself so her life could look more interesting on TV? It appeared so. I worked my ass off to promote Peep Show and make it a success, I continued firmly and unapologetically. The work I put into this production actually means something to me. If I tossed Kendra in as my understudy, people would see that on TV and think Peep Show is just handed from one ex girl next door to the other. It would tear down everything I've built to make myself an individual. I was told that it wouldn't and that Kendra wouldn't even be able to do the show, that she would think she could do it, but she wouldn't be able to pull it off. The answer is no, I maintained. I'll support Kendra on her show, but I'm not handing my life over to her. No way. They finally conceded before offering one final plea. But think about it. It would get you back on television. Did he really think I wanted back on TV that badly, I thought? I couldn't begin to imagine Kendra's peep show run. First off, there's no way Kendra had the self-discipline to perform in 8 live shows a week. She didn't possess that kind of work ethic, and I could never unleash Hurricane Kendra on my cast and crew. Sure, we'd been on excellent terms since we left the mansion, but I knew for myself what a nightmare she could be to work with. Her incessant tardiness, endless excuses, and toddler-like tantrums had become a thing of legend. After continuing to turn down the peep show understudy idea again and again, they really were relentless, I finally agreed to shoot a simple scene with Kendra at her new home. Hank's NFL career had ended the year before, and they had settled outside of Los Angeles for the debut episode of her series. The plan seemed organic enough. She and I would simply talk and catch up. Producers encouraged me to tell her about my career and plans for the future. Apparently, this was intended to inspire Kendra to get off the couch and build her own career, a story arc they hoped to follow throughout the season. When I arrived at her house in Calabasas, I was genuinely eager to catch up. We hadn't seen each other since filming Hef's Runaway Bride Lifetime special. She took me on a tour of her home, barking at Hank to stay out of the shot as we passed him in the hall. I talked at length about my life in Las Vegas, including my plans for Peep Show, other opportunities I was considering, and wanting to get out of the shadow of Playboy to continue to do things on my own. As the conversation wore on, Kendra seemed to be getting more and more annoyed. It was becoming clear that she didn't like the idea that she wasn't the only Girls Next Door graduate to find success. We wrapped our scene, hugged goodbye, and I jumped back into my Range Rover for the 5-hour drive back to Las Vegas. After all, I had a show that night. Before pulling out of the driveway, I shot her a quick text. "Thanks for having me over to your house. It was fun catching up." She didn't respond, which was odd. Usually, she was pretty quick in responding to my texts or tweets, but I didn't give it too much thought beyond that. A few weeks later, a field producer for the series asked me to place a phone call to Kendra. They wanted to film her receiving the call from me to set up the idea that I was coming over for the visit we had filmed. After being rescheduled countless times because Kendra was not answering her phone, not coming out of her room, or not showing up to film, it became clear what was going on. I spent 5 seasons on a reality show with Kendra, and her habits hadn't changed much. Instead of addressing the issue or having a mature conversation with producers, Kendra's go-to method was passive-aggressive avoidance. Oh well, I thought. If she didn't want the scene on her show, that was her business. Despite the fact that the producers couldn't coax Kendra into shooting a phone call with me, they continued pressing the peep show understudy idea. In the beginning, I was told, "The network loves the idea for the premiere." Then it became, "The network loves the idea for the season finale." And each time I said no. "Besides," I said the last time we discussed it, "I'm just uncomfortable with it. Something is wrong with Kendra. She doesn't answer my texts or tweets anymore. I think she's pissed at me or something." My concerns were dismissed. "That's just Kendra. You know how she is. She never gets back to anybody." "Not really," I said. "Actually, she used to always answer my texts right away." Anyway, the answer is no, it just doesn't feel right. When they showed me the premiere episode of the horribly titled Kendra on Top, it was clear what she was so irritated about. As I rattled on to Kendra about my career, they cut to her interview. "I'm pretty competitive," she stated at the camera. "I'm kind of already established, but I don't want to lose that. I want to gain." I could tell Kendra was annoyed and trying to be careful how she worded what she wanted to say. She didn't like being set up to look less successful than me, even for one scene. While that wasn't the intent, producers simply wanted to inspire her to get her ass off the couch, the comparison couldn't be helped. The next thing I heard from her was a headline she retweeted. "Kendra reveals why she is no longer friends with Holly and Bridget." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Kendra had apparently given an interview to a tabloid explaining that she wasn't friends with either of us, as if she were somehow better than everyone else. "We all found our own little roads to go, and that's just the way it goes," she said, retweeting the article to her followers when it came out. For someone who was all of a sudden trying to act like she was better than Bridget and me, she sure wasn't above using us for publicity when she needed it. Anything for a tabloid-worthy topic. Hurt and confused, I retweeted her post saying, "Thanks for letting me know, Kendra." Of course, I wasn't going to stoop to her level and only address this on social media, so I decided to text her how I truly felt, that she was a coward and that she tried to act like the real girl on TV, but she's the fakest person I've ever met, and that if she had a problem with me, she should have confronted me like an adult instead of just going silent. This time, Kendra responded, and the exchange went something like this. Girl, I don't have a problem with you. I just don't like it when people think we are friends, she texted. Do you even have a clue how rude that sounds, what you just said? I replied. Who are you? I don't even know you. We were never friends. It was all just work, she responded in all caps. Wow, I'm sorry I was stupid enough to think we were really friends. Have a nice life, I finally texted. After that, I deleted her number from my phone. Kendra and I haven't spoken since, and I have to say, I don't miss her. For all the things that were going right in my life over the past few years, there was still one area that I needed to get on track. The dating scene in Las Vegas was pretty grim. During my 3 years as a single lady, I had the worst luck in the dating department. I swear I could write a book on the types of douchebags that lurk around these days. Maybe I will. All of my life, I was an over the top romantic, but by 32 years old, I had become pretty disillusioned. I'd often wonder what I did wrong. It seemed that spending my 20s at the mansion had caused me to miss out on meeting the one. I was alone because I wasn't going to settle for less in a man than what I wanted or deserved. For the first time in my life, I started to lay plans to become a crazy cat lady. What would my life be like without the marriage and children I had always envisioned in my future? It looked like spinsterhood was becoming a distinct possibility, so I decided to ready myself for it. It all sounds a bit dramatic, I know, but I had pretty much given up when in 2011 I finally met the man I would marry, Pasquale Rotella. Isn't that how the universe always works? Pasquale and I met when he brought his Electric Daisy Carnival Festival to Las Vegas. He was around town a lot and we knew a few of the same people, so bumping into each other was inevitable. I thought he was good looking and he seemed like fun, but when we started talking, most of the time through Twitter, I used to be Twitter obsessed. I wasn't really expecting things to get serious. It wasn't that I didn't want them to, I'd just come to a point in my life where I didn't expect anything romantic to work out anymore. Boy, was I wrong. Not only did we completely hit it off immediately, we were instantly inseparable. He was perfect for me. He was smart, funny, and sexy, and I was always my happiest just hanging out with him. He was the total package and was also at a point in his life where he was ready for a serious relationship. A little later down the road, he started talking about wanting a family, and he actually meant it. This is an important note. A man has to already know what he wants. Don't waste your time trying to change someone's mind. It never works. And like they say, when you know, you just know. Our relationship got very serious very quickly, and within a matter of months, we were practically living together. Despite our whirlwind romance, our respective careers, he owns and operates his entertainment company Insomniac, while I was still consumed by my peep show schedule, meant that making time to see each other required significant effort. In early 2012, I had decided not to renew my peep show contract for 2013, despite the lucrative offer presented to me. That year marked my 4th year with the show, and by then, I was not only playing Bo Peep, but I'd also adopted the singing Goldilocks role as part of my performance. As much as I loved it, there wasn't much further for me to go with the production. And while I wasn't eager to leave behind a cast and crew that had become like family to me, somehow staying didn't feel right. I wanted to leave the show while it was on top, and was it ever? The schedule was so time consuming that as long as I stayed with the production, I wouldn't have room to add anything new to my life professionally or personally. I wanted to explore new career options, spend more time with Pasquale, and travel the world. We even talked about starting a family as soon as my contract was over. In preparation for this new life, I purchased a home in LA, one of the fairy tale style dwellings I had been in awe over the first time I visited Beechwood Canyon in Hollywood several years ago while filming an episode of The Girls Next Door. Something I couldn't even dare to dream about having for my own back then was now a reality, thanks to everything I had done after I left the series. My move on to this new life would get an unexpected push forward in July 2012 when I got some surprising and amazing news. I was pregnant. Pasquale and I had discussed having kids. We even planned to start trying as soon as my run with Peep Show was complete. But everything happens for a reason, and we received the fabulous, life changing news many months earlier than we had even planned to start trying. I started to suspect something was off, and a trip to the doctor confirmed the news. We couldn't have been more thrilled. We wanted to shout it from the rooftops, but the doctor suggested we stay hush on our big news until our second trimester. Miscarriages are common during the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. Keeping a lid on our new addition for the 3 months was brutal, but necessary. I knew the announcement would attract a lot of attention, so I didn't want anyone to know until I cleared my first trimester. Looking back, I'm surprised no one at Peep Show guessed when I suddenly stopped arriving backstage with my signature large Starbucks iced Americano clutched in my paw. My biggest concern was how I was going to finish my commitment to Peep Show. It would be impossible for me to perform through the end of the year. I'd certainly be showing by then, and I'm pretty sure producers didn't envision their sexy lead with a growing baby bump. When I finally was able to break the news to my employers, we decided how long I would stay in the show. Through mid-October 2012, which marked the 5th month of my pregnancy, and they began their search for a new headliner who could start a few months earlier than anticipated. People sometimes ask me if I was worried that performing while pregnant might somehow harm the baby, and my answer is, of course not. I was used to the physical demands of the show, and my doctors approved every move I made. If anything, I think performing made me healthier than I would have been sitting on my butt doing nothing. I had an amazing pregnancy and stayed in great shape. Though some of the costumes were altered to allow for a little more modesty, I didn't even have to loosen my corset throughout my run in the show. I believe that many sacrifices need to be made in order to do your best as a parent, but I also believe you don't have to abandon your whole life. I vowed not to cry on my last night, but that was impossible. The outpouring of love I received from the cast and crew was just too overwhelming, and I couldn't help the tears. These were tears of joy, the best kind. Over the 4 years I spent with Peep, I'd grown tremendously, from the insecure, unsure playboy outcast to the confident, successful mommy-to-be. But it didn't take long for the vultures to start circling. In the wake of my departure, Angel, my understudy, was summoned back for 6 weeks while Peep Show found and trained my replacement. Before my dressing room door even fully shut behind me, I received word that a certain someone had already contacted Peep Show's producers, begging them to hire Kendra for the lead instead of the rumored frontrunner, Ice-T's wife, Coco Austin. How dare you! I yelled into my cell phone. I was irate, digging my nails into the palm of my hand. After I had spent months explaining to him why this idea made me so uncomfortable, I couldn't believe he had the audacity to even attempt such a betrayal. I'd been foolish enough to think we had developed a friendship over the last 7 years, but obviously I was wrong. And I'm pregnant right now, I screeched, my blood boiling. I don't need the stress of a public feud with Kendra. He sat silent. What could he say? Finally, he came back meekly with the confession that he thought if there was a feud between Kendra and me, it would be good publicity for the two of us. That's the kind of publicity Kendra likes, not me, I said. I don't want it. Despite his effort, Peep Show chose Coco to debut as the new headliner. After a few months, the show officially closed. It was a shame to see such a wonderful show close, but as they say, all good things must come to an end. Rainbow, Mary smiled. That's a wonderful name. Mary O'Connor and I were sitting on her front porch waiting for one of her girlfriends to pull up so we could drive to lunch together. She was one of the few people I trusted enough to reveal my chosen baby name to. Most people think the name is an outrageous choice, but Mary knew me well enough to appreciate my whimsy. I'd first heard the name in middle school. A girl in my sister's class had the name, and I thought it was the prettiest, best name ever. I never had it on my list of future baby names, though, until I became pregnant, and when it resurfaced in my mind, it felt like the perfect name for our child. And while many people think her middle name Aurora was simply after my favorite Disney princess, it was also a name that is a little more common in Alaska, where I spent much of my childhood. I'm so thankful I had that last visit with Mary, because it wasn't long after that I received a heartbreaking phone call. "Mary's in the hospital," my old friend Brittany told me. "She's not doing well. Bridget and I are going to go visit her. Do you want us to tell her something for you?" As my due date was drawing more and more near, I was on doctor's orders not to travel and was stuck in Las Vegas until after my delivery. "Yes," I managed quietly. At age 84, Mary had recently undergone cancer treatments, but had appeared healthy and upbeat the last time I saw her. Hearing that she was now on her deathbed was a shock. "Please tell her I love her and miss her and that I wish I could be there." The message wouldn't be passed on, however. When Brittany tried to visit Mary, supposedly Crystal turned her away, saying Mary didn't want to see anyone. Strange. To the best of my knowledge, Hef never visited Mary at the hospital. Probably because he wasn't in the best health himself and rarely left the mansion anymore, not because he didn't care for her. In fact, Mary was the only person I ever saw Hef be truly candid in front of. Everyone else in his life, including his relatives and significant others, seemed to be held at arm's distance emotionally. One of the few truly positive things that I took away from the mansion was my friendship with Mary. Everything else that came from that place was laced with darkness, a hefty price tag, or an eventual knife in the back. Mary was a no-nonsense, tell-it-like-it-is gem of a lady. The world needs more people like her. Aside from the sad news of Mary's passing, I was in wonderful spirits during the final weeks of my pregnancy. I couldn't be more excited to meet my little girl. Everything was coming together, and my dream of having a family was coming true. Less than a week before my due date, I received a surprising call from E. The network wanted to order an hour-long special about our baby's birth. I jumped at the opportunity. Not only would it be such a cool thing for Rainbow to see when she got older and a wonderful family journey to document on camera, it was also a great way to celebrate as I eagerly awaited her arrival. E brought an in-house production crew to shoot the special, and they couldn't have been more fun, professional, and easy to work with. When I requested privacy for certain moments, no below-the-waist shots during birth, privacy during breastfeeding, the crew looked at me like I was crazy, and one of the cameramen said, "We weren't planning on shooting that anyway." I was floored, but in a good way. I had been so used to the crew being ordered to capture every instance of nudity possible in my Girls Next Door days that I had been prepared for a battle. Being surrounded by the crew, even in the delivery room, made me feel extra safe and supported during this new experience. They made me feel like they had my back and were the perfect complement to the love my family and friends were surrounding me with during that exciting time. Little Rainbow Aurora was born on March 5th, 2013. Anyone who's pushed out a baby will hate me for saying this, but I actually enjoyed giving birth. I chose to have an epidural, and the entire delivery took only 2 hours. Rainbow is truly a blessing and without a doubt my greatest achievement to date. The year 2013 turned into a time of rapidly checked off milestones for me. Just 3 months after giving birth to Rainbow, I was officially an engaged woman. Most little girls fantasize about the day the man she loves asks to spend the rest of his life with her, and my special day was nothing short of magical. Pasquale proposed with a cushion-cut 40-carat yellow diamond ring surrounded by pink and yellow diamond flowers, which was amazing, but the best part of the ring was that he designed it himself with me in mind. He popped the question at the very top of a Ferris wheel at his Electric Daisy Carnival. Despite the magical, colorful sea of craziness below and the elaborate fireworks spectacle above, it was strangely calm and quiet in our little booth atop the giant wheel. When Pasquale pulled out the ring box and asked me to marry him, I exclaimed an immediate yes. The smile was plastered on my face like I was the happiest maniac alive. How did I not see it coming, I thought. We had discussed marriage before, but with all the baby excitement, I was too preoccupied to focus on the when and the where of it. It was all too perfect, and even caught me by surprise. I had never felt more loved than I did in that moment. We married 3 months later on September 10th, 2013, at Disneyland in Anaheim, California. Would you expect me to get married anywhere else? Our wedding was more beautiful and more perfect than I could have ever imagined. We had the entire park to ourselves, including our own private viewing of the Phantasmic Water Show and fireworks that lit up the night sky just for us. The bridal party and I were given the exclusive Dream Suite inside the park to get ready in. The ceremony was held at the Blue Bayou restaurant inside the Pirates of the Caribbean, and our reception was in my favorite part of the park, New Orleans Square. At the end of the evening, we left the wedding in a horse-drawn pumpkin carriage. If that's not the makings of a fairy tale, I don't know what is. This feels like an appropriate place to wrap up this book. Holly found her happily ever after, and I did. I believe Pasquale and Rainbow were always the future intended for me, and without embarking on that remarkable, bizarre, twisted journey down the rabbit hole, who knows if I would have ever found them. But let that not be the moral of my story. True happiness doesn't come from simply getting married. I don't believe a woman's worth should be measured by whether or not she is married. I'm still surprised how many people still think that way. Marriage and family are certainly beautiful parts of life, but I believe those things can only truly be appreciated when we find, love, and respect ourselves first. Pasquale didn't come to me at a time in my life when I needed rescuing most. He came when I didn't actually need to be rescued at all. And because of that, we developed a true and meaningful partnership. He's my Prince Charming, but I didn't need saving. I saved myself. I won't apologize for the choices I made because all of them brought me to the wonderful place I am today. But rest assured, my journey is far from over. Just like Alice, Wonderland opened up my eyes and prepared me for my real life's adventure, one that has only just begun. And
All right, that is the end of the book, good people. That is the end of the book. The next couple of things are going to do acknowledgement. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think? Oh, by the way, she's divorced from her husband. She got divorced back in 2019. So she's no longer married to Pasquale, whatever his name is. So, guys, what do you think of the book? Okay, who's still in here? Knock, knock. Anybody still in here? All right, I'm going to end this. I have something to say in my next live. It's going to be very, very short. I just have something to say. Okay? Later.